Blog Talk Radio.
Killer's mind is a twisted road, a ticking bomb ready to explode. A killer's thoughts are hard and cold, 1,000 secrets in its hold. The empty hours and restless nights, the living dead, that inner shrine, a heart of stone that cannot break, a flooding rush, building quake, a heart of stone, a heart of stone, a heart of stone, a heart of stone.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and children of all ages. This is your host, Yvonne Mason, and, of course, this is the show Off the Chain. And those of you who have been with me from the beginning know that anything and everything, well, within reason, is discussed on this show, and that's why we call it Off the Chain. Y'all laugh. Tonight, my two hysterically funny guests are retired police officers. Both of them are out of New York, but yet they have never met each other until lately. My first guest is B.P. Ryan, also known as Brian P. Ryan. He was born and raised in the New York City Borough of Queens. He retired as a sergeant with the New York Police City Department after 20 years of service. He now lives on Long Island with his lovely wife, and he is a first-time author, with Night Watchers being his first novel. And I hope that his second novel, the one that he is working on, is a follow-up to this novel, because I'm going to tell you, this novel will just absolutely blow you out of the water. It just comes out of nowhere. And I thought I had it figured out. Boy, was I wrong. My second guest...
You're too kind.
My second guest, also a retired New York police officer, now living in the beautiful state of flooded Florida, is Hallonquist. He had 30 years of service as law enforcement, and he has spent the last 6 years as an investigator regulating security, private investigative, and repossession industries in Florida. He's worked all types of security, private investigative, and repossession companies, from the smaller little one-man shops to the largest corporate agencies. He owned his own private investigative agency prior to go to work for the State Department's Florida Division of Licensing. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not all this man does. Where he gets his energy, I do not know. This allows him valuable insight into keeping companies in compliance from both the agency side and the state of Florida side, so they don't have to close their doors. His law enforcement background puts him in good stead to consult with businesses or individuals in putting together security assets or to investigate potential sites for their business to expand. He's also available to perform consultations on any criminal or civil legal cases. He has an extensive background in major felony and other cases. So review his credentials. You might need him someday. He will perform an internal audit for any security, private, investigative, or repossession agency before the state does, so that your company is in compliance and to keep you from being fined. That includes the company itself, on-site inspections on your employees, or on an annual or individual basis. Now I'm out of breath. Al and Brian, welcome.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Well, y'all are quite welcome. I'm telling you, I don't know where you guys get your energy. I'm going to tell you what.
Too much coffee.
I got to tell you, though, as much as I love Brian and New York and the New York police, and I'm a Florida boy. I've always been in Florida. So. See?
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. You can take the boy out of Florida, but you can't take the Florida out of the boy. So with that said, let's just start with you, Al. Let's give me some of your background. How did you get started? When did you get started? What made you get started?
Well,
Where are you from?
I was what they called I was what I used to call a dinosaur, because I started back in 1974 with the Fort Pierce Police Department. And that's where I first met Cactus Jack, and he was with the state attorney. And I worked for them, and then the sheriff's office, and then the medical examiner as the chief investigator. I was one of the homicide detectives for the sheriff's office. And then I made my way down to Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, and retired from them.
So in 1973, let's go back to Fort Pierce, you were maybe not part of, but you were aware of the serial killer Gerard Schaefer.
Oh, sure. Yeah, in fact, we did some of those when I was with the police academy. They would pull us out and have us go help Rick McElwain do the searches.
Yeah, Rick McElwain was a good friend of ours. Well, you know that my book, Silent Scream, is about that crime, right?
I sure do. Good book.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand in this little area that we live in, it's Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, St. Lucie County. Back in the 70s, all these guys were tight with each other. When he talks about Cactus Jack, that is my husband, and my husband, helped start the state attorney's office, and he knew all these guys. So he and Al go way back. I'm pretty sure Al can tell us some stories.
No.
So when did you retire?
Well, I retired from law enforcement in 2001, and then after that I went to work for the state, which is where I regulated PIs, security guards, and the like. And then I retired from that a couple of years ago and opened up my security consultation company.
And what does, I know I read your bio, but if somebody were to call you up and say, Mr. Hallonquist, I need your help, how would you explain your company to them?
It depends on who's calling. I work with some of the security companies themselves or PI agencies that they may get a call from the state saying that they're going to be audited, and I would avail myself to come in and do a pre-audit, which is I could come in and go through what they would do in an inspection, and they could correct it before the state arrived. And then that I'm a whole lot cheaper than what the fines are. So plus that goes on their record as well. But I also work with, if you have a company and you're concerned about internal security in the company where you want to keep your employees safe from disgruntled employees or any type of an active shooter, then I'll help you come in and set up a plan. I've worked with a few churches as well, because that's becoming, problematic now with the war on terror and everything.
That's good to know. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to keep your employees safe and you're looking for someone who knows how to do that, Al Hallonquist is your name. He's on Facebook. He's also, you can look him up on the Internet, also with churches. Do you go into schools as well, Al?
I tried to do that, but unfortunately here in Martin County where I live, they suffer from the NIMBY disease, which is not in my backyard. They have the impression that, it won't happen here. So, of course, Columbine.
As a nation, I think. Go ahead with Columbine.
Yeah, I'm just saying Columbine proved the fallacy of that, but they still don't want to hear it. So
that is true. And as a nation, until it does happen in our backyard, we walk around like ostriches with our head in the sand.
Exactly.
Brian.
Yes.
Tell me about your background.
Well, I grew up in Queens. You could probably hear my New York accent. I'm sure that might take a little bit of getting used to from some people. But, basically where I grew up, it's Archie Bunker territory, or the King of Queens. It's basically that area. At the time, I was, going through after high school. A lot of my friends, we were just trying to figure out what we were going to do. I did a couple of years of college. And my friends started taking the police test, and I figured, let me do that as well. So fortunately, I took the test, and I got hired within, I believe it's about 6 months. And, I did 6 months in the police academy, and then I was assigned to Midtown Manhattan, which was, it was a fantastic detail. It was, people would say it's like having a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. I'd be having, I'd have a foot post, right in front of the Empire State Building. I was probably in hundreds of tourist photos. They'd always come and, please take a picture with me, which was fun. I'd love to see where some of those pictures are today. And also we'd be in Times Square, and that was back in the bad old days where Times Square wasn't like it is today, where they have Disney stores and fine restaurants. So, I've seen the changes in New York over the years. I was in a unit that responded basically it was a task force, and the unit was basically on standby for parades, any unrest, riots, demonstrations, things of that nature. So, that was an interesting assignment, because you never knew what you were going to be doing from day to day. From there, I was fortunate enough to fall into an administrative assignment where I had weekends off. So being new on the job, and they say, hey, kid, would you like to have Saturdays and Sundays off? It wasn't a tough decision. So I did that for a few years. I studied, became sergeant, And then I was transferred to the Borough of Queens, which was helpful because I grew up there, so I kind of knew what the neighborhoods were like. I had a lot of different assignments in between. Back when I was a police officer, I had an assignment. I was temporary assignment to the intelligence division, which is basically I was just do temporary duty. I'd be like a personal bodyguard for diplomats when they came into town. So, we'd wear a suit and tie, had the little pin on our lapel, and unfortunately the budget didn't call for talking into your wrist. I had to carry a bulky radio either in my pocket or on a belt clip. But that was interesting. We had a few, I got stuck a few nights with the ambassador from Yugoslavia, and, proved to be an interesting night. Nothing too exciting, but, a little something different. And back as a sergeant, I'm sorry, I'm getting all these little texts. I don't know if people know that I'm on the air.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I was a patrol supervisor for many years. I worked the desk, the typical image of the grouchy old desk officer, although I tried to keep a smile on my face, and people would walk by me and say, "Why are you smiling?" And I just look back at them and say, "Because I know something." They just shake their heads, not knowing if I was pulling their legs or what, So, I used to get away with a few things doing that. I was the anti-crime sergeant for a while, which meant that I was working in plain clothes, and I had a squad of police officers with me who also were in plain clothes. And, our job was to patrol the area and address, whatever the crimes were. We'd have today what they call ComStat. It's a computerized program where they can map out what crimes were happening and where they were occurring and when. And back then that was just starting, but we used to have pin maps. So, we'd know where the felonies were taking place. And we try to address them. We'd back in the day, it was grand larceny auto was a big crime. A few years later, I did similar work. It was a conditions unit, also in plain clothes, but we were doing more quality of life enforcement. And we'd be looking, kids staying out late, drinking in the parks, and the graffiti was very big at the time. So, that was something that we went after. And, had a few little success. If you bust one or two of them, they got the message, they'd move on. And, the store owners were good. They'd be able to clean up the messes and try to maintain a good, presence in the area. I also was a field training sergeant. I'd be in charge of training the rookies fresh out of the academy. So I enjoyed that, because it's a big, Al could tell you, transitioning from, the academy to actually going out on the street, it's two different things. So, that was rewarding. I enjoyed doing that. And I look back at it now, and a lot of my rookies, they're big bosses on the police department today. So, hopefully if I ever needed a favor, maybe I could call it in. I was also involved in community policing, which was nice also. That was big in the mid-'90s, where, each of the officer would have a specific beat, and they'd get to know the residents and the store owners, and being a supervisor was nice too. I'd be able to, walk around and also mingle, meet with the store owners and the residents, and develop some nice relationships over the years with some of the people. It was very nice. My last assignment on the job, I was assigned to the auxiliary police section, and that was, it was a unit that was in charge of the department's, I believe at the time it might have been 5,000 auxiliary police that were assigned to New York City. And what I did there when I first got there was I was assigned to budget and recruitment. So I had to come up with, recruitment projects, media, presentations, flyers, brochures, things of that nature. And I performed investigations on any malfeasance with any of the members in that auxiliary unit citywide. And before I retired, I was in charge of training. So that was rewarding, too. I was able to do a lot of research and put some good training together. And I'll tell you a quick story. I was working on one. It was a middle management training course I was developing. And it was all set to go, and unfortunately, it was the night of September 11th. So I had a nice big lesson plan that never got delivered, and I retired shortly after that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Al,
so.
I have a question for you, my friend.
Okie doke.
Do you remember 1983 Ulrich Road?
Who was that now?
1983 on Ulrich Road, Pauline Mettler.
Oh, yeah. Boy, I'm reaching back to that.
Yeah. I have a picture, and I think you're in it, with McElwain, and y'all are at that crime scene.
Could be. In 83, I was with the medical examiner.
Mm-hmm.
So...
You remember what happened to her?
No, yeah. I remember it being a homicide, but I can't, God, they all kind of run together.
She was picked up on US 1 hitchhiking back down to Key West from Melbourne. She was picked up by 3 black gentlemen. 2 of them had just gotten out of prison. And they took her to Ulrich Road and raped and executed her, and then took her ID and all of her belongings and threw them out the window as they traveled back down to West Palm Beach. And it was you and McElwain and George Velarde at that crime scene.
All right, he was FDLE. I remember that.
And
is that the one where the was one of the bad guys? Is that J.B. Pig Parker?
No, Johnson's one of them. 2 of them got life.
Okay.
1 of them got 10 years, because the one that got 10 years didn't. He tried to talk the other 2 out of not killing her. Right.
Yeah, I remember that now.
And the case went cold, and they were in prison for something else. One of them was in prison. 1 or 2 of them were in prison for something else. And he got a case of the conscience and was talking to his psychiatrist and confessed to this murder. And they called Velarde up there to talk to him. And that's how they found out who she was. Well, they found out who she was through her teeth, because that was all that was left, because when they went to pick her up, George said that y'all almost had to shovel her up because she just slid all apart.
Right, yeah. Dick Souveron did the teeth on that, I believe. The forensic on, yeah. He worked for Joe Davis down there. He was the guy that's actually the father of forensic odontology. And I remember that was one of the early cases that he did. And my first exposure to him, the man was brilliant. Yeah, boy, that brings it back. That's been so long ago, though. I hate to be so sketchy about it, but like I said, there were so many. People don't realize the homicide rate up in the St. Lucie County area. I mean, it's tremendous. I mean, I work more homicides between being a homicide detective for the SO and with the medical examiner that, I mean, I work more than some of the guys that I know that work in Palm Beach County have worked. And we're talking
It's
county-wide.
amazing how the numbers changed since then. You know, the volume of crimes back in the 70s and 80s compared to today.
Oh, yeah, that is. It really is. And you've seen the changes
up
in New York City.
Now, from the 80s, it went from like maybe 2,000 murders a year down to like 400 and change.
Right. Now, Giuliani takes a lot of credit for that. What do you think? You were in Giuliani's era.
Yeah, no, Giuliani, he set the tone. He basically took the handcuffs off the police. He says, go out, do your job. And he backed us. He was good that way.
Yeah.
He supported us, and him and at the time was Bill Bratton, and they started going quality life enforcement with the theory of broken windows. Go after the little things, and the little things will lead you to the bigger things. And
sure.
That strategy worked.
Yeah, it does.
So they cleaned up the streets. You know, we went after the squeegee people, everybody, the drunks on the street, the junkies. The strategy worked. It was a good time in New York. It was busy. You know, the police were able to do their job, and the Giuliani administration backed us up.
Well, what is a shame? What's a shame is that sadly officers don't have that luxury anymore to do their job.
Yeah, it's a tough environment today.
It really is. And, if I had to do it all over again, I'm not so sure I would, not with the way things are today. And people misunderstand you when you say that. But everybody has got a video camera today.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I wouldn't mind that if they were accurately portraying what's being videoed, but you're only seeing a portion of it, so it becomes prejudicial.
Exactly.
That's true.
And that's the part that I have the issue with. I don't care who taped me, but if you're going to tape me, show the whole tape.
Well, this goes back almost 25 years with Rodney King, and that was somebody who had one of those bigger cameras. And at the time, when I was training rookies, I used to tell them, hey, be careful out there. Don't do anything that you don't want to see yourself on the 6 o'clock news.
Right. And Rodney King's a good example, because if you saw the whole video, it gave you a whole different perspective as to what was going on.
Sure.
The media only showed you the inflammatory part of that video.
Right. That's with almost all the incidents, it's that way.
Right. Exactly. And, you can't catch a break as a cop. Anything and everything you do is wrong.
There's even places that cops go in to get a meal, and employees are so stupid they refuse to serve them. Do they not understand that those cops have their backs?
Well, the irony of it is, I just had a discussion with somebody on Facebook, of course, and, they were railing against the cops, and, they're very pro-Black Lives Matter, and that's fine. But as he was railing about the cops, I said, well, what do you think about the irony of the Dallas cops that were protecting the Black Lives protester, that 5 of them got killed doing that? And, that's the irony. Here's the cops that they're protesting out there dying, protecting them. And, that never, it's not relevant to them and their cause. And that's the frustrating part of it.
Right. And we were out there all the time. I'm sure you were too, Al. Like, you have a demonstration, and, you just be impartial. That's our job. We're there to make sure people have that right to protest. Yeah.
Right, of course.
Ladies
and gentlemen.
Hang on just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Chain. I am your host, Yvonne Mason. And my guests tonight are Brian P. Ryan, also known as BP Ryan, and I will tell you why shortly, and Al Hallonquist. They are both retired police officers, and I am so honored and grateful and humble that I have these two gentlemen in my interview room tonight because, number one, they're both very successful. I want them to be more successful in what they do. And number two, I think it's time for an honest and open discussion about law enforcement and those men and women that daily put on that uniform with no thought for their own safety, with no thought of what if something happens to me, what will my family do? All these men and women care about is protecting the citizens of this country with their lives. Now, think about that, ladies and gentlemen. We were just discussing Black Lives Matter, and Al had said that someone had talked to him on Facebook, and 5 officers were killed protecting Black Lives Matter people who were protesting. Now, sadly, we have forgotten that if we did not have these men and women in uniform, that we would have total anarchy in our streets. There's a movie out called Purge, and I know many of you horror fans have seen it. And this movie, one night a month or one night a week or one night sometime, people can go out and commit total anarchy against innocent citizens with no repercussions and no accountability. Now, if we did not have our men and women and that thin blue line, and believe me, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very thin blue line. They are the only thing that is between us and total anarchy. So instead of saying, I don't want the cops, or I hate cops, or in some instances, I'm not going to serve you in a restaurant or a fast food place because you're a cop. Stop and think. If someone comes after you with a gun, with a knife, with the ball bat, with a car, with their fist, who are you going to call? You're going to call that cop that you just refused to serve because you're too stupid to see beyond your nose? I would think again before I made those statements to that thin blue line. We do have a call-in number. You can call and debate this issue with us. We welcome it. The call-in number is 516-387-1756. Gentlemen, do you agree with that assessment?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it is. It's very ironic. The police were out there to do a job, and people don't see that it's the police that are there to protect them, to protect their rights. And it's just a sad situation, the state of affairs today.
It really is.
I have a quick story I want to tell you guys, and both of you will appreciate this. I'm sitting in my home, minding my own business, doing what I do, and there was a knock on my front door. I open the door, and there stands one of St. Lucie County's finest. Actually, it was Port St. Lucie's finest. Good-looking young man, dressed in his uniform, complete with his vest, and he said, I just wanted to let you know that the road crew is cutting some limbs off of your tree out here. I said, excuse me? He said, yeah, it's blocking the stop sign. I said, and they sent you to my door, you, a police officer, to my door to tell me that they're going to cut limbs off of my tree. He said, yes, ma'am. I said, oh, hell no. I said, I'm not mad at you. I appreciate what you do, and I thank you for your service. I said, it's not you. I marched my happy little self out there, and I read that group of men, the Riot Act. I've never seen men look at me like deer in the headlights. Now, remember, guys, I'm 4'11". And all of my life, when I went out there and read them the Riot Act, not only was there one cop out, there were two cops. They sent two cops and two cars to my house to tell me that they're going to cut my tree limbs.
Wow.
And I said, with all of the traffic that we have on Floresta and all the people that use Floresta as a quarter-mile straightaway, and we have people pulling in and out of driveways, you guys are going to call the cops to come to my door to tell me y'all are going to cut my tree limbs down. I said, you're out of your flipping minds. And the guy said, but it's policy. I said, I don't care what it is. You've taken these people off of the streets and doing their job when you could have respected me enough to come and knock on my door. Well, we didn't know how you would react. I said, well, you know how I'm reacting now, and it ain't pretty.
That's funny.
They changed the policy.
That's hysterical.
I called Greg Orvac and told him, I said, this ain't happening. No. With all the crime we got in this city, and they're going to take two, not one cop, but two, off the streets in two cars to come, and I understand one was protecting the other's back. I got it. But it was unnecessary. Call the cops if I give you a hard time, but I had no intentions of giving them a hard time because I knew the damn tree needed cutting back.
Yeah, things are so busy. You know, you're driven by 911 calls that, the police officers really don't have that much free time to do things like that. I remember old-timers would tell me back in the day that they'd get calls to go to see some elderly person. They needed a light bulb changed in their house. And, they'd be happy enough to do it. But, nowadays things are so busy that you rarely get some free time to do things like that. You're constantly going from job to job to job. So, you're lucky you could squeeze your lunch in a tour.
Exactly. Well, Al knows. How long have we been known as Pot St. Lucie, Al?
Oh, I can tell you a better one than that. When I first started with the sheriff's office, I worked under contract to the city of Port St. Lucie. They hadn't started their own police department yet, so they contracted with Lanny Norval, and they put one car down in Port St. Lucie per shift. So I would come to work, and they would usually have anywhere from 5 to 8 calls holding for me. because the other guy that was getting off he's still finishing up a call that he got. So it was just nonstop because Port St. Lucie was busy. I mean, really busy. So one day I get a call, and it was a neighbor problem call, and we would triage calls, actually, because we had so many. We had to just, sift through them and take them in order of importance, more so than, when they came in. So I finally get down to the neighbor problem call. I go to the house, and the woman says, starts very irate with me. It took me long enough to get there. She had called like a couple hours ago, and I said, okay, got it. And I said, the reason why, and I explained it to her. I'm trying to be patient and tell her. She goes, I don't want to hear your nonsense. She goes, come here, let me show you what the problem is. I said, all right. So she walks me to the back of her house, pulls the drapes on her sliding glass windows to the back of the house, and she goes, there, do you see it? And all I saw was the backyard. I said, your backyard? She goes, no, dog crap. And I go, okay. She goes, yes, my neighbor's dog comes over and craps in the yard. So I'm like, seriously? Okay. And I mean, I've got like 8 calls holding. So I said, well, all right, I'll go over and talk to your neighbor. She goes, that won't do any good. She goes, here, and reaches around the corner and hands me a shovel. She goes, here, go clean it up. So, yeah, and I said, no, that's not going to happen, but, thanks for asking. And, of course, she called the sheriff and complained, and, but it didn't go on. Lanny was good about that. He pretty well took care of his troops, so. But
that's a name from the past.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, people just, they're self-entitled, they're self-absorbed, and they don't get it. And, I mean, I literally left there and I would get off at midnight, and I'm still answering calls at 4 in the morning. So, being paid overtime, which was fine by me, young guy that needed the money. But, that's how busy it was down there in Port St. Lucie at the time. So, I mean, but people just don't get it. So.
No, and you get the crazy jobs, too. Get the family disputes, which, you always got to be careful. They're dangerous jobs. But
they are.
Yeah, they're terrible jobs. And, like, my line to them was always, hey, you didn't invite me to your wedding. Don't invite me to your divorce. So the big trick is you separate them. Yeah.
That's a great one.
Yeah. So, we try to solve the problem as best we could and hopefully leave on their merry way. But things like that, there's always something going on. Minor things. Neighbors complaining, too much noise. They're playing the music too loud. Well, like you say, the dog crapping in the backyard. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to run into.
Right.
The thing with domestics that always scares you guys is you don't really know what you're walking into, because if you go after the man, all of a sudden the woman, it dawns on her, there goes my meal ticket, and if you've got yourself in a predicament, if you don't have more than one person there, you wind up getting killed.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
And that's happened.
Yeah, happened quite a bit. Yeah, our policies were always you never went alone to a domestic. And, back in the day when I worked in Fort Pierce and at the sheriff's office, you rarely had a backup because you were so spread out and so busy. But that was one thing that they were always adamant about. You went to a domestic, you had a backup. So
good policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, and what Yvonne said is exactly right. Here's a woman. I have had women, beat on mercifully. They're barely coherent, and the eyes are swollen shut, and, you're taking the husband out the door, and the next thing you know, you got her on your back with a knife.
Sure.
And,
And
it's almost cliche it happens so often.
Yeah, the women are too dumb to understand that if they don't get out of it, they're going to wind up dead. The next call will be to Alice and me to come pick them up in a body bag.
Oh,
and that's something else that's happened all too often. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure Brian's worked them too.
Yeah.
And
sure.
if they get a TPO, and the guy shows, and this is what I tell women when I talk about domestic abuse, is you can get a TPO or a TRO or whatever they call it in the state you're in, but if you don't get away, not just 2 doors down, but if you don't get away, he will come and find you. He will worm his way back in, and when he finds you, he will kill you.
Yeah, there's a whole psychological profile with that, and it's difficult because they're made to believe that for whatever reason the psychological abuse is actually in many cases worse than the physical. They're scared to leave the guy. He tells them, "Well, if you leave me, I'll find you and I'll kill you," and they believe it.
And he will.
Maybe, yeah. And or if you leave me, I'll take the kids away from you, which can't happen. But they don't know that. They're fragile.
I had that one used on me. I also had I'll make you look so that no one will ever want you again. That was one of my. That was one of his favorite lines, and it's a slow process. Domestic abuse is not something that happens overnight. It's a slow, like you say, it's a psychological process from alienation from family and friends to telling you how stupid you are to no matter what you do, you're going to get beat up because you can't do anything right. And then the beatings get more and more frequent, and finally you shut down because there's nothing else for you to do. And if you're not a strong enough human being to get out of it, he will kill you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm empathetic to how they feel the way that they do. And it would break my heart because, you're trying to help them out, and they know, but they're too scared to go. They're just too terrified. So, you come away feeling helpless sometimes. That unless they make the break, you can't physically drag them out and put them in a safe space. But
I think you should be able to. I think for 48, 72 hours they should be declared incompetent because they really are. When you think about it in the big picture, at that point in time, they really are incompetent and not able to make a cohesive, logical, life-saving decision.
Well, there's some validity to that.
Yeah, almost similar to removing children from a household also.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's a tough call, but, it has to be made from time to time.
Right.
So, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your journey. Before we talk about your journey as an author, a little bird told me how you and Al hooked up, and I want you to tell our listening audience. By the way, audience, I am Yvonne Mason, and I am your host, and this is Off the Chain. My guests tonight are Al Hallonquist and Brian P. Ryan, also known as BP Ryan, and they are both retired police officers. And I am very humbled and appreciative and grateful that they have agreed to be my guest tonight. We've been talking about many things within the realm of police work along that thin blue line. Please feel free to call in at 516-387-1756 if you want to debate an issue, ask a question, have a discourse. We welcome it. So back to you, Brian. How did you and Al hook up? Besides your common love of police work, I know there was something else.
Yeah, it's interesting. We both have a common interest. One of our hobbies is aerospace memorabilia, autographs, especially with the astronauts, the early space program. And I was involved with some websites years ago asking questions about validity of autographs and merchandise that was for sale. And I wound up getting some good advice from Al, who had the same interest. And, just chewing the fat online, we both found out that we were both retired sergeants from police departments. And that's basically, we took it from there. So, we knew, there was a mutual trust. The thin blue line kicked in. So we knew that we could rely on each other. If there was questions, we'd steer each other in the right direction.
Al, how long have y'all been friends through this journey?
Oh, man, it's been a long time. But, Brian, you're exactly right. Police work is a brotherhood. And, we have, I like to think, and I'm sure you agree, that we have more of a bond from the police side of it. That makes our enjoyment of the hobby even better. I mean, when we found out that we were both police officers, the bond came from the job.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter if you're in New York and I'm in Florida. You're all brothers.
That's true.
But how do you think? I don't see that same bond today. Do you?
It's rough. I remember when I was on the job. As you're a young cop, especially if you're a single, you had a little money in your pocket on payday. So everybody said, "Okay, come on, let's go out. We'll have a beer." And
right.
It was fun. Things like that happens. But from what I understand now, that really doesn't happen as often. Each precinct used to have their precinct club meetings once a month. They'd get together. It would be nice. There'd be food and drink. And from what I understand, that's gone by the wayside now. So it's
and
sad.
I think they're worse off for it. I really do. You don't build that bond and that trust. And I used to have, with my shift, we would have choir practices. That was after the old Joseph Wambaugh book. And we would loosely call them choir practices, where at the last night of our shift before we changed to another shift, we would meet after work on the top of one of the parking lots, and somebody would bring the beer, somebody would bring pizza, somebody would bring wings, somebody would bring soft drinks for those that didn't drink, beer, and we just hang around and a couple hours and just chew the fat, and
Yeah. We used to call it sometimes training thereafter.
There you go.
That would be a good title for a book.
Yeah, that write that down. That might work out.
Based on that story, that would be Brian. That would make a great mystery novel.
It would make a good mystery novel. It could be a good comedy too, because some of the stories, stories that the cops tell at those, it's like you would never believe them. It's like you'd say,
"Oh, I would. I'm married to a cop."
Yeah, but the average person would say, "Nah, that's crazy. That never happened." And we'd look at ourselves and say, "Yeah, you can't make this stuff up."
No, you cannot make it up.
I have to tell y'all a real quick story. Y'all know I adore Cactus. And Al will appreciate the story, because Al was involved in the law enforcement at the same time Cactus was, and they were all involved with the square grouper.
Oh,
and you know what square grouper is, and Brian, if you may or may not know, so for our listening audience, I'm going to educate them. Square grouper is not fish, ladies and gentlemen. Trust me, it is not fish. You don't eat it; you smoke it. It's bales of marijuana that's brought up from Central and South America, and because the fishing down here had gotten so bad, the fishermen went fishing for square grouper. They were paid to go out past the 3-mile marker and bring in these bales of illegal pot. So one night my husband was doing a square grouper run, and they were after this group of fishermen. Don't know if it was the Sutherlands or not, Al, but it wouldn't surprise me. And they get to this boat, and one of the gentlemen that is one of the fishermen jumps in the water. And so he's trying to get into Jack's boat, and Jack's beating him with the paddle. And he's reading him his rights, and he says, "You have the right to remain silent, but you do not have the right to get in my boat until you tell me what I need to know." So they get in court, and he's telling the story to the judge. And Al, Cactus knew every judge between here and the line. And he's telling the judge this, and the judge said, "You can't do that." And Cactus said, "Well, I read him his rights." He said, "But you had to let him in the boat."
Oh, that's great. That's
yeah,
good stuff.
That's funny.
So that is one of Cactus's stories that is forever infamous. So that could be a great book that you and Al could write together, and it could be a comedy mystery with a twist, because the stories that these guys have, stories that Rick McElwain told me before he died, and Velarde told me, and things that I've garnered from my relationship with all of you guys. You can't make this shit up.
No.
No, but you got to be careful too. You got to be careful and make sure it's a real story, because anytime a cop starts telling you war stories, you kind of got to look at them with a raised eyebrow, because they get a little better. The stories get a little better, and the cops look a little better each time it's told. So.
Exactly, and after a few more drinks too.
Oh yeah, that always helps lube it up. Yeah. In fact, when I was teaching in the academy, I would tell the new troops, hey, you guys here. I'd always come in towards the end of the academy, and I'd get them all frothed up, and I'd say, hey, they're rookies and they're ready to go out and kill everybody and shoot everybody. So I'd say, hey, you guys hear any good war stories? Oh yeah. What's your favorite one? And they'd tell you. And it's usually one you've heard a million times. It maybe not by that guy, but by somebody, because most of these stories are interchangeable. And so then they go, this and that and the other, and you say, oh, that's good. And I'd say, well, by the way, do you know the difference between a war story and a fairy tale? And they go, what? No, what? And I'd say, well, a war story starts out, or fairy tale starts out once upon a time, and a war story starts out, now this ain't no BS. And they look at you for a minute, and then it finally dawns on them, okay.
Yeah.
So, but there are, like we're talking about, though, there are really legitimate stories that you cannot make up. I mean, well, in Brian's book, it just boggles my mind to this day that there's UFO watchers in Central Park. But Brian, you told me that that's a real thing. The book took place in that particular chapter. It was in Casino Park, which is in Flushing, Queens, which is not too far from the Old World's Fair or where the New York Mets City Field is. And this is back in the late 80s. I remember there was stories, people watching, there were UFOs. They saw things in the park. And I was a rookie sergeant, and this is basically the same story that my protagonist had. And he was driving to a job of some noise complaints in the park. And I remember I said to my driver, I says, I heard on the news, they said supposedly some UFOs in the park. I says, what are these people smoking? This sounds crazy. And my driver at the time, he looked at me dead serious. He says, no, Sarge, it's true. He says, I grew up in the area. He says, I saw something there. And I never questioned the guy after that, because, like I said, he was dead serious. So, who knows what he saw. But, let me throw it in the book, because you never know what's going on out there.
And
oh, for sure.
Since Al so kindly segued right where I wanted to go with this, I want you to tell our listening audience the name of your book and how you started on this journey as an author.
Well, I wrote a book. It's my first novel. It's called Night Watchers, and it's available on Amazon. You could get it either in paperback or on Kindle. And, for years I've always threatened I was going to write a book, and people used to say, you're full of it. So, because I used to write, you write 1 million police reports during your career. And I wrote crime reports. I wrote unusual incident reports. I was writing training manuals. At one point I was even writing obituaries. So, let me do something creative. So one day I was talking with a friend of mine, and I don't know if you're aware of this, there's something called NaNoWriMo. It's the National Novel Writing Month, which is every November. And the goal is you have to write a 50,000-word novel within the month of November. So I kind of challenged myself a few years ago to do it. And I just sat down at my computer, and every day I'd just bang out chapters and chapters and chapters. My wife wanted to kill me because, November is prime time for Christmas shopping and decorating and things like that. So I got a few evil looks during the time. But, I was persistent. I kept up at it. And it took me about 22 days to write the 50,000 words. And
wow.
when all was said and done, I think I ended up around 54,000 words or something like that. But,
wow.
It took a while. It's about a dozen revisions, and it went through several beta readers who, made some corrections and suggestions for me, and I sent it to an editor, and, finally it gets to the point where you put the pen down and say, yep, it's done, so, it's, like I say, about 54,000 words. It's not a long book. It's a good beach read, something you go away for a weekend. You could certainly do it. It was fun to write, and I think it's a fun book to read. And
it is.
And last year, during November, I sat down, started working on my second book, and in 17 days, I did about 54,000 words. So
wow.
That book is done, and it's just basically in the editing stage now. I'm going to probably send it off to some beta readers, and I haven't looked at it critically, since I wrote it. But I know there's areas that need improvement, some clarification, and a little research, and I'll probably have to pick Al's brain, sometime in the near future on a few things. But, it was fun to do, and I was hoping to get the book out a lot sooner, but sometime in 2017 it'll be available. And it's going to contain basically the same characters from Night Watches.
Give our readers a little bit about the book without giving away the very twisted ending.
Okay, well, basically, the protagonist is a sergeant named Jack Reynolds. He's assigned to an intelligence unit, and he is dating a female police officer, and she is divorced from a police captain who is a little bit jealous. And so there's a little friction that develops between the three of them. And one night, the female officer, police officer Megan Gilday, she's manning a conditions post on a midnight tour in Casino Park. And for whatever reason, she doesn't return at the end of her tour. So there's a big search. What happened to her? They find some clues at the scene that she was there. They find her car and some personal items. So it's a big investigation to find Megan, see if she's still alive. And, from there, it's just a lot of the internal politics in the police department, some of the petty jealousies, some crazy bosses, some crazy situations that take place. A few unplanned murders happen, and there's a few twists thrown in, and hopefully a good ending that people will enjoy.
And like I said, I didn't see that. I did, and I didn't see that one coming. Usually I can figure things out as I'm going along because that's how my mind works, but I didn't see that one coming at all.
That's my challenge for the next book.
And you will do it. You will do it. Let's talk a little bit about the lack of respect for authority. How does that affect morale within the ranks and within the community?
Well, as a police department supervisor, you got to start. You have to gain respect to have authority within your own police department, within your own troops. You have to be fair but firm, just dealing with your officers. And that becomes a two-way street. There is a mutual trust and respect that you develop from, say, a sergeant to a police officer. And hopefully that works up the ranks. And from there, you project that, and hopefully you could reach the community. You deal with people with respect, and hopefully you'll get that respect back. However, a lot of the problems in the communities are far larger than the police department is able to handle. So therein lies the main problem. We do our job, and it just becomes a little bit more difficult that we're only one small piece in the problem-solving machine.
Al, do you think that lack of respect for our men and women in blue and that lack of respect for the judicial system in general has been part of the breakdown and the increase in not just petty crime but heinous crime?
Yeah, I think it's the problem. I think Brian touched on it briefly when he said that the problems are far bigger than what the police departments can handle. Part of the problem that you have is, it starts in the home. And, there's only so much you as a policeman can do. And it reminds me of when I first started, we had a sergeant in Fort Pierce named Jimmy Blakely. And Blake was he was promoted through the affirmative action, and which at the time I didn't have a problem with because Jimmy Blake was probably one of the best cops that I ever worked with. But, he a black guy from, Georgia, not very literate. In fact, he used to bring me the reports when he got promoted and asked me to review them for him because he couldn't read them. Now, he knew his limitations, but I loved the guy. I thought he was an outstanding supervisor because, he just didn't have the book learning. But it used to crack me up because I'm sitting in the station late one night, and when I say it cracked me up because I compare it to today, but I'm sitting there at the station, and I'm writing a report, and we had like a split door. And the station was open to the public. You didn't have it blocked up like they are today with limited access. And we're right off Avenue D at 7th and D, and which, if you're familiar with Fort Pierce, the Avenue D area is very high crime. And I look up, and I can just barely see this gray head sticking up over the door. So I look, and I get up, and I walk over, and there's this, probably 70, 80-year-old black lady. And she's got this, 16-year-old kid standing there, and she's got him by the ear and reaching up, holding him by the ear. And she asked me if Officer Blake was there. And I said, well, he's out on the road right now. And she goes, would you mind calling him in? I said, no, not a bit. So I called dispatch, and I had them call him in. And he comes to the station, and she explains to him, in the language that, he was a jitterbug hanging out on the street all night and, not coming home, disrespecting everybody, not going to school. And Blake looks at the guy, and he goes, is that right? And he goes, what's it to you? And he goes, looks at the little old lady, and she says, that's right, Officer Blake. I was hoping you'd take your belt to him. He goes, all right. Takes off his gun belt, hands me his gun belt, pulls off the belt from his pants, and I mean, he laid into that kid. I mean, I'm sitting there cringing. I'm sitting there hurting. I mean, it was brutal. And I mean, he's chasing that kid up and down the hallway, and I mean, just beating him a new one. And I'm now, mind you, I'm new. I'm sitting there going, I don't know. Can he do that? And so, and I knew this kid. I'd see him out on the street when I'm working. And so, but the thing was, this woman, she's trying to raise this kid. She's, half this kid's size. And, he wasn't listening to her. And he was hanging out with the kids on the street. He was getting involved in stuff, doing drugs, doing this, and dealing drugs. And so she came down to the station, and she got Blakely to whip him a new one. And, boy, by God, did he. And, I mean, to this day, I still cringe thinking about it. But you know what? You go back out on the street, you didn't see that kid.
No.
He was home.
No.
You know,
and
was
again,
it right what he did? I mean, I'm not taking a side there.
But the thing is, she was at her wit's end, and
right, sure.
She was the grandmother. She really had no business raising this teenage boy when she should have been sitting in a rocking chair enjoying life, and he was going to disrespect her. Well, her only option was to go and find the man that had, as Brian said, created trust in the community to get help to straighten this kid out before he got worse than his butt beat by a cop with a belt. Maybe he would have been killed in prison.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, it worked. You never saw the kid out on the street anymore.
Tough love.
He found out.
Yeah,
go ahead.
And, you know, I mean, you can't do that today. I mean, the cop would be in jail if he did that today. But, you know, that's the breakdown in the family. She didn't have a family unit to support her with that. She didn't have a man in the house. And so, you know, back then cops, that's why I used to laugh when community policing became the big rage. You know, we used to do community policing just back when you had time to deal with issues.
Oh,
and, you know, but we got away from that. We became reactive rather than proactive.
Right.
And, you know, and I mean, but it worked. You know, and you with that breakdown in society, and you're expecting, you know, the cops to deal with everything. You know, there's the big thing right now is the Black Lives Matter movement and this Colin Kaepernick, you know, with his sitting down during the national anthem. And, you know, is there an issue? Well, I don't. His comment was, black kids' bodies are piling up in the street because the state can kill kids with impunity. Well, you know what? If you want to talk about a problem, I get it. You know, if you perceive there's a problem, let's talk about it. But let's be honest about it. You know, that statistics prove that there is no blue on black impunity of killing, you know, kids. Where the black kids are dying in the street is by the other hoods and the gang members, and you know. So why are we waging this war on the cops? You know, the cops are out there trying to help and trying to do what they can do. Are there racist cops? Of course there are. Racism is a disease of ignorance that you'll never be able to do away with, but you can deal with it and you can work with it. So if you want to do something like what Kaepernick is doing, and you want to engage conversation, I'm all for it. Let's do it, but we need to engage in an honest conversation.
And a proper focus.
My thought on Kaepernick is this. If he feels that there is a war on black children, then instead of sitting down and not standing for the very country that allows him to make millions of dollars as a half-white, half-black adult, why is he not out in the community acting as a mentor to these children who have no father figure?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But you're not. Is he going to be part of the problem, or is he going to be the solution? By sitting down and making all these wild statements, he's inflamed the problem. He's not offering any solution.
Right. And it's making it worse. And that's why you have more instances of cops being disrespected when they're going to places. You know, the discussions I get in on are phenomenal. I mean, they show a videotape of a Hispanic officer approaching a black kid, and the black kid is bowing up on the cop, and the cop is being very, you know, you're riding your bicycle on the sidewalk, I need to see your ID, you know, and she's just very calmly going through it with him and talking to him. And, you know, the kid's just bowing up more and more. Well, you can't do that. You need to do this. You need to do this. And, you know, what's being lost in the translation is I went back and looked up that video, and I saw the full-length video. She approached the kid, was very respectful to him, and the kid had a chip on his shoulder. Now, where did that kid get that? He's getting it from the people that are telling him, cops hate you. And
exactly.
So if you want to have a conversation, I'm all for it. But you need to carry on an honest conversation.
That's
Brian,
for sure.
doesn't that go back to the old adage of when a mother would tell their child, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I'm going to call the cops on you?
Yeah, there's something to that. Yeah. I haven't heard that in years, but that's true. Yeah, I'm going to call the cops. That's why you always used to say people love the fire department, because nobody said, I'm going to get the fireman after you. They always said, I'm going to get the cop after you.
But it's the same premise.
Sure.
In
the cop
we'll
becomes
take
the
Avenue
boogeyman.
D because we'll take Avenue D because Al and I are both familiar with Avenue D.
Mm-hmm.
On any given day, at any given hour of that day, you will find grown men, and in my mind, grown men are young men between the ages of 16 and 60. Grown men standing on the street corner with no job, not in school, no job. They are not being productive. They are a drain on society because they are not being productive, and then they go out and commit crime because they need money for whatever reason, be it drugs or food, probably drugs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then they say, well, the man's on my head. But you're a victim of your own creation. You created this monster because you didn't want to get an education. You didn't want to go to work, even if it's a menial job of picking up trash to get your welfare. You didn't want to do that, but yet the man is at fault because you committed the crime.
Yeah. It all
Where's
boils
the
down to
logic?
choices. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's the choices people make. Yeah.
And I used to tell my children, you can do anything you want to. I don't care, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You make that decision, and you're not too young to make that decision. At 2 years old, if you want to touch a hot stove after I've told you it will burn you, go ahead and touch the hot stove. But understand, when you make that decision, there are going to be reactions, and there will most definitely be consequences. So if you are ready to make that decision, and you can sleep with that decision tonight, you better be prepared to wake up with the consequences in the morning.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah,
because you wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror, you got to be able to like what you're looking at.
Exactly. Now, that brings up another point. Do you guys think, with your background, your expert, your knowledge, do you think that the laws that have been enacted within our criminal justice system have hampered the police in being able to effectively do their job? And when I say that, what I'm saying is y'all can go out and make clean arrests all night long. But once you get them in front of the judge, and y'all know my background, a defense lawyer and a prosecutor can take the same statute and argue it either way and make a convincing argument. But those statutes have become so non-existent. Do y'all believe that that has hampered the judicial system in meting out the punishment to fit the crime?
That's a tough one because that just goes so deep with, like, say, the judges, the interpretations of the law. I mean, the best we could do as police officers is make sure, proper training is always good. You have to understand the law. You have to be able to articulate why you made an arrest, what you saw, how does that fit into the elements of a crime. And that's basically all we can do. We got to make sure that we can spell it out according to the law, and then you present it to the district attorney's office. And from there, it's basically, your hands are tied. You got to stick to your story and, what you wrote up in your story. And you have to present it before a judge, and you're going to have to go back and forth between, the defense attorney and the prosecuting attorney. And hopefully the judge and the jury will see fit to, issue a fair ruling. So, the police can only do so much.
And I agree. I think what I am asking, and Al, feel free to disagree with me if you want, but let's say you locked up little Johnny Smith last week for popping a convenience store. He gets in front of a judge. It's his first offense, so instead of making him do 6 months in county, he says, oh, I'm going to put you on probation because it was not malicious. It wasn't armed. You just went in and were stupid. You didn't know any better because for whatever reason. So little Johnny gets out. Well, in the middle of his probation, little Johnny finds a gun. He buys a stolen gun from Joe Schmo. Well, little Johnny goes back to this convenience store, and now he's committed an armed robbery with possible first-degree murder. He's back in front of this same judge. So he's got 3 counts against him. Do you feel frustrated, Al?
Oh, well, from my point, yes, definitely.
Yes. Yeah, no kidding. Because, I mean, after a while, you start building up some sense and, some common sense. Street sense, I think, is a fair way to refer to it. And you know what's going to happen. Yet, when you go in there and that judge turns them loose because, he, for whatever reason, just felt like he didn't want to, bang him, you're sitting there looking at your buddy and you're going, he'll be back in a month. And it's going to be something worse. And your prophecy was always fulfilled, not because you liked it, but because you knew, if they didn't do something. But the problem you have is, and this falls in line with what you're saying, Yvonne, because, you have statutory law and then you have case law. And case law is where they take, somebody will appeal a statute and say, well, the statute says you need A, B, and C. But we think that when that law was made, it really meant C, D, E. So the appeals courts will review that, and they'll, if you get, and I'm not making a political statement here, but if you get a liberal judge who goes, oh, yeah, that's right, and he's an appeals judge, and what's that circuit out in California, the Ninth Judicial, and I mean those clowns are a perfect example of what I'm saying. They take statutory law, and by the time they get done interpreting it, it's not even remotely close to what that statute was. So there are days that you come to work, you pop somebody for a crime, and they're walking out the back door before you get even done. The ink's dry on your paper because of new case law decisions that you didn't know about. And, it's frustrating. So, I mean, and it falls in line with what you're saying. It's, you know what's going to happen. It's creating more of an issue with crime.
Yeah. And not only that, but it backs up our court system. It backs up our police officers because they're writing the same report day in and day out, and it gets a little. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a serial killer because that's the way a serial killer's mind works, in that every time they commit that crime, it gets a little more heinous, a little more daring, and a little more in your face. And there's just what these career criminals are professionals because that's all they study. Is how to break the law and get away with it.
And if you're not held accountable for breaking the law, then there's no effect of the law in deterrence.
And therein I rest my case.
That's it. There has to be an assurance of swift punishment.
Right.
And there is.
Unfortunately, that's not there.
And the sad part is, what I see coming is that it's going to get more and more that way because, Brian, it's like you were talking about when Giuliani was the mayor of New York City. He allowed the cops to do their job. He did the broken window theory. If you see even a small crime, clean it up, because when you clean up the small crime, you clean up the big crime. And as a nation, the judicial system has said, oh, they don't know any better. One of my favorite defenses is they had a bad childhood. And I'm going, really? They had a bad childhood. So they are not held accountable for their actions now because they had a bad childhood.
Yeah. Well, then you have it on the opposite end. They have that one kid where he suffered from affluenza. He grew up with a wealthy family, and he took the car out and he killed 3 friends or something like that. So that's a crazy case.
He was too rich to go to prison.
Exactly. He didn't know better.
Right.
And let me tell y'all about a case out in Oregon that just will absolutely blow your mind. This guy was married to this girl, and he told everybody in this little town they lived in that he was going to kill her. He told her the day before he killed her that he was going to kill her. Now, she'd been in this marriage for 14 years, and he'd abused her for about 14 years. The day before she was murdered, she went and told a neighbor that he was going to kill her. He took the bullet that he was going to use to kill her and showed the neighbor and told the neighbor he was going to kill her. Nobody picked up on it. So on November the 1st, this gentleman by the name of Donald Richardson calls the neighbor in a panic and says, "Cindy has left me. I don't know where she is. We've lost one. We lost somebody. We lost Brian. Brian, call back. Maybe he'll call back." Didn't know where she was. So he files a missing persons report. He had executed her and dismembered her body and thrown her in the Columbia River. He got 25 years. When he got out, after the family begged him not to let him out, when he got out, he molested his granddaughter, who was 14 years old.
Well, there's no accounting for stupidity. I mean, I don't know what the statute is and, how that applied to what he did. Maybe
Brian,
that was the maximum he could have gotten.
Back?
But
yeah, I'm back.
Okay. Go ahead,
Al. Missed you, man. So how much of the 25 years did he serve?
He served, he didn't serve at all because in the meantime, while he's in prison, a former police officer who's now a state legislator and put to the House a bill that would release nonviolent felons if they had served X amount of their time and had been good boys while they were in prison. But the unintended consequences were some violent felons were allowed to get out too. So he was let out even earlier than the 25 years.
Gotcha.
And the family saying, don't let him out. And they did, and then this is my next book that's coming out. And then he molested his own granddaughter.
Yeah. Well, I guess system didn't work in that one, did it?
No, it did not.
Unfortunately, too many times it doesn't work.
No, unfortunately. It's like we talked about with Giuliani and allowing the cops to do their job. It just seemed, back when, throughout my career, it just seemed like you fought everybody. You fought the public, you fought the prosecutors, you fought the defense attorneys, you fought the judges, you fought everybody, and all you wanted to do was the right thing. And you with that street sense, you knew what was going to happen if it didn't happen. And now you see the recidivism, and I'm sure Brian agrees. I just sit there and I look and I just shake my head. I mean, people are just, I don't know. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
But on a lighter note, maybe they will all kill each other and we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That'll be for another show.
I just had a
Go
chill.
ahead, Al.
I just had a chill.
Well, you think about it. If the innocents weren't involved, I would say let's pull all the innocents off the streets, put them in a safe place, and let the little jitterbugs have it. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, I don't care. Just let them kill each other and let God sort it out.
Oh. I hear you. You get to that point, don't you?
Yeah.
But that's the frustration showing through, yeah?
Yeah, because I've sat in enough courtrooms and watched these deals that they have, and I'm just shaking my head at the absurdity of it.
And you know,
really,
the sad part was, you know, in my early days of law enforcement, yeah, I enjoyed it. I had fun. We did pranks. We did things as a shift. We had the brotherhood. But we all worked together. I mean, you got along with the firemen. You got along with the prosecutors. You know, even the public defenders you got along with. I mean, they did their job. But, you know, back then doing your job as a defense attorney was making sure that the guy didn't get railroaded, not pulling Swifties to get him off.
Right.
And so, you know, everybody respected you had a job to do. The prosecutors back in those days with Bob Stone, even with Bruce Colton when he first took over, you know, there was the great guys, good prosecutors. They had a desire to put the bad guys away, you know. But when I went down to Palm Beach Gardens, you know, you go into a state attorney filing and, you know, they're arguing with you on why they don't want to file it. And I mean, you know, you're like, what? You know, it just boggles your mind.
Or you make a robbery
policy
arrest and they're knocking it down to a grand larceny.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can do you better than that. If you were in a stolen car, you got 3 arrests of possessions of a stolen vehicle before they would file on you. So
wow.
you wouldn't get filed on. You could have a stolen car, and if it wasn't your 4th time, they wouldn't file on you. You know, we'd book them for it. We'd take them to jail and charge them with, you know, grand theft.
Sure.
And, you know, but then the state attorney would just no-file it because it was only his 1st, 2nd, or 3rd one. And then on the 4th one, then they'd file on it. You know, you're like, what?
Yeah.
You know.
It boggles the mind.
Yeah.
That's sad. That is. Are they just lazy or do they just not care? Or
oh, you know, I don't know. You can't get a.
Are they not educated?
You know, I don't know what it is. You know, and it all came down from whoever the elected state attorney was at the time. That was his policy. I think his rationalization is, you know, the overcrowding issue. Well, you know, you don't not file charges because you think there's an overcrowding. You know, that's. So
that makes about as much sense as my telling my child, well, now, I'm not going to get on to you if you run outside and get in the middle of the street and get hit by a car because, you know, it's okay for you to do that. There's no logic in that reasoning. It's overcrowded. Well, let's go even further back, Alan Brian. Let's go back to when the Supreme Court decided that people with mental issues, and now I'm talking about severe mental issues, the severe schizophrenics and the severe paranoid people that really have nowhere to go within society. So they commit crime, they live on the street, they wind up in the local jail because there's nowhere to put them, and of course police officers are not trained to deal with mentally ill people because they're not psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors. So there's where part of our overcrowding is we've got mentally ill people in jails and prisons that really should be in a facility. But they have rights that they don't have to be locked up in a facility for their own good, but yet they can sit in jail. What is the difference?
Well, years ago, they had the asylums, you know, the mental homes, where people were, and there was a lot of abuses going on within those facilities. And what happened with the court decisions, the pendulum just swung too far the other way. They released a lot of these people from these places, and there's really not too much you could do with them now. And hence, they're on the streets. They're the homeless people. They're committing petty crimes, sometimes a lot worse crimes. So it's rough. The hands are tied with the police. What you could do with them? I mean, they'll go into an institution temporarily, and who knows what happens from there.
Then they're let out to do the cycle again. But the problem, it's like Al said, the essays say, well, the jails and prisons are overcrowded. Well, they're overcrowded because we've crammed the mentally ill in with the hardened criminal, and if that mentally ill person really had no malicious intent, by the time they get through being in prison, you can bet your sweet bippy they're going to be very well versed in how to be a hardened criminal.
Oh, sure. There's a lot of training that goes on in the prisons.
Oh, yeah. Organized training sessions.
Yeah.
People don't realize that. Yeah.
And you become a professional at being a criminal because that's all you study. And you get institutionalized.
The tricks of the trade.
Yeah, and then you can't live outside of the prison walls, so you get out and it becomes a swinging door. You get out, you commit another crime, so you can go back in, serve your time, you get out, you commit. So because that's the only place that you feel like you belong.
Yeah, they know no other way.
Right. Yeah, we don't do enough to mentally ill.
Go ahead.
And that is we don't do enough to work with mentally ill. We don't do enough training with the police either. We have, with some agencies do. St. Lucie County does a 40-hour block in how to deal with, people with mental issues, stress, and suicidal people and so on. I mean, I got limited training in that when I ran the hostage negotiation team. But even with that, you're still not trained as a caretaker.
Right.
And, you're putting these poor schleps in jail because, they did some sort of stupid little crime, but then you have the stigma. You can't put them in a I hate to use the word asylum, but you know what I mean.
Right.
And, but you need a place for caretaking for these people with trained professionals because they don't belong in a jail with, Bubba and, the other people. And, they're not seeing things the same way you and I and allegedly normal, rational people do. So,
okay,
now,
Al, you just stepped over the line. I don't know anybody in this world that's normal.
I told you I would. How did I do that?
I don't know.
Well, that's funny. People ask me, any other members of your family on the police department? I say, no, they're normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know what my motto is? What is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're right. The mentally ill, our normal is their chaos.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like the training that we used to get. We used to call them the emotionally disturbed persons, the EDPs. And basically, as a patrol unit responding to a scene of an EDP, basically the training was just to isolate them, keep them away from hurting themselves or any other people. So, that brought in the use of non-lethal devices, using shields or a shepherd's crook or, a stun gun if necessary. So they went for the training with that, and I'm sure since I retired, I'm sure the training has improved since then.
Yeah. But what do you do with them?
Oh, yeah, that's it. You bring them to the local hospital, and they're put into the the psychotic evaluation unit. And, that's what I mean. Who knows? They may be back out on the street in 24 hours.
Well, I can guarantee you that in Florida, we have what we call the Baker Act in Florida, which is where you have somebody that is, a danger to themselves or others, from a mental situation. And so you take them down to the mental health facility and, I've literally walked out to my car and started my report and seen them walking by me back out. you know, because the guy on duty says, oh, he's fine to me. And, you know, but that's just because he didn't want to deal with him. And,
does it matter,
you know,
that he's seeing butterflies on the wall or pink elephants marching down the hallway?
No. But
then,
too, that's only a short-term solution, you know.
Right. Okay.
So.
Now let's take it one step further, guys. How do cops now deal with things like just happened down in your area, Al, with the young man who was a star student, never got into trouble, and wound up killing that husband and wife and then chewing off the man's face because of, last I heard it was flakka, it could have been something else. But how do you deal with these people that get on these drugs that are just, I have no word for them?
Well, I mean, you know, they're a danger to you. I mean, obviously a danger to others in this particular case. You know, it's certainly not normal when you eat somebody's face, but, you know, I mean, how do you as an officer responding deal with it from a safety standpoint? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because this is not something that you may or may not learn at the academy, because it's just started happening in the last 3 or 4 years. This god awful whatever combination of lethal cocktail these kids are putting together.
Well, I mean, it's like any other drug-induced thing. You know, you have to be, you know, aware. I mean, when you get there and you find out that, you know, he's doing something as egregious as eating somebody's face, then you know, that's your first clue. You're not dealing with somebody moderately even normal. So I think we can all agree that that's an abnormal situation. But,
one would hope so.
You know, well, I mean, you know, it's all, that goes back to officer safety, too. You know, you have to deal with each situation as it comes. I arrested a guy for a burglary at Fairlawn Elementary once. I was with the sheriff's office, and I just happened to be there when the call came out, not too far, so I responded. I got there before the other units, and here comes this guy climbing out of the window. So I get him down on the ground, and I arrest him and cuff him. And I'm walking him out to the car, and he looked at me, and it was in the eyes. I mean, you know, you look in the eyes, you know, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and it was like somebody flipped a switch, and there was nothing normal looking in these guys' eyes. And he told me, he says, you know, I'm not going to jail. And I said, well, kind of late now, you're on your way. And he says, no, you don't understand. And it's very conversationally. And he said, you know, I'm just not going to go. And I said, well, you know, I think the cuffs are going to disagree with you. You're already cuffed, pal. And he goes, not for long. And he started pulling the cuffs apart, and I could hear the bones snapping. Oof. And he's smiling at me while he's doing it. And I finally threw him down. I had flex ties, too, and I put a flex tie on him. And he had completely broken the bone above his wrist in two. And he's standing there telling me, see, I'm not done. I'm going to pull it off, and I'm going to pull my hand off. And it was just conversation. It was so creepy. You know, it wasn't like, you know, somebody out of control. It was just, I'm not going to jail. I'm going to break my wrist. I'm going to pull it off. And he started doing it. It turned out it was PCP, you know, so he wasn't even feeling what he was doing to himself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same parallel that, you know, you had with this kid. You know, you just have to deal with it as you know, whatever training you've had all along, which, you know, will help you deal with it. But now the question becomes what happens to him when he goes to court. Of course, he's going to have all kinds of psychological evaluations, and I think it's going to be safe to say that he will probably, you know, when the key thing here is, did he know what he was doing when he was doing it? The Monot rule. And once they get through that with him, I can it was drug-induced, but, that could be a defense. Will he walk from it? No. I think ultimately he's going to end up at some sort of a mental health facility. But the problem with that is, how do you cure that? This is drug-induced. He's going to get out and do the drugs again. Maybe you dried him out from whatever it was, but, if
the
he goes
addiction's
back,
probably still there.
Right.
Yes.
So you're releasing him back into society because, you can't incarcerate him because you're not finding him guilty of a crime by reason of insanity. And so what do you do with him when he's, quote, cured, uncured, unquote? You got to let him go. So
that's just
Brian,
another one of those problems. Yeah. What's that, Yvonne?
I told Brian to weigh in on this. So what are the odds, Brian, of this kid, let's say they do as Al says, he's found guilty by reason of insanity, which we know is not a defense, and he goes to this facility and he serves 5-10 years and he gets out. What are the odds of this kid getting out and doing something even more heinous without being on drugs?
Yeah, that could happen again. I mean, who knows what type of treatment he's receiving while he's being incarcerated. And incarcerated, that's not even the right word for it, yeah, it's, what it is. They expect law enforcement to be the social worker, the priest, the rabbi, the lawyer, the father, the brother. And, we're just cops. We want to go out and do our job and sign out at the end of the tour and go home safely. And it's, like I say, we're just a small piece of the puzzle. And cases like this, people are going to be in a facility. They're going to be released after a certain amount of time. And it's a gamble. You don't know whether they're going to repeat the crime again or walk the straight and narrow path. It's a gamble. And that's just, for the members of law enforcement, you always have to be prepared. You don't know who you're dealing with. And unfortunately, some people come out of these facilities and they're a lot worse than they were before they entered. So it's a part of a problem that the police have to deal with cleaning up. It's the responsibility falls to others to come up with better solutions of what to do to treat people. Does it start with education? Does it start with people in the homes? It's a big issue, and like the police department is basically just a small part of it.
But sadly, y'all are the ones that get the brunt of the hammer on the head when people are angry.
Oh, yes, yeah, we're the front line, sure.
The judge doesn't get beat up. The attorneys don't get beat up. The mental facility doesn't get beat up. The prison system doesn't get beat up. It's the cop on the street that's just out there trying to do his job, trying to take care of the citizens within the community with that very thin blue line. And ladies and gentlemen, if you see a cop on the street, or if you're in a restaurant with a cop or in a store with a cop, just tell them thank you, because they put their life on the line every single day of the week. And I'm not talking about just when they're in uniform. These guys are on duty 24/7, 365. Even if they're not in their patrol car, if they are out with their family, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, they have an obligation to protect and serve, even on their downtime. Am I right, guys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got that obligation anyway. I think Brian will agree. When we first started in police work, the money was never that good. Yeah. And I mean, when I first started, I made how much did I make? $475 a month. That's what I made my first month. And now they make better money, but you didn't take the job solely for the salary. You had a good job, you had a good retirement, you had good benefits. But you did it because people are going to laugh and they're going to think you're being corny, but it's the truth. You want to help. You know,
it's a calling.
You go out. It is. And, you know, there was times that I get off at midnight, but I'm still working with a kid that, you know, who's having problems at home. I'm sitting and talking to him till 3 a.m, talking him down because, you know, you care about the kid. You like a teacher, you like to see the positive of what you're doing. And, you know, you don't get paid for that. You know, where you get paid is when you see that kid a year later and
right.
he's doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mean, so, yeah, you know, when you're off duty and you see something, tactics get involved. You don't just jump up and start engaging in a gunfight, but, you know, your first inclination is to protect those around you and, you know.
Well, that's like I'm sure you do it too, Al. Like, say we're out with the family, we go to a restaurant. We always sit somewhere where we have the wall behind us, you know, so we have a full view of
sure.
what's going on. Yeah.
Yep.
Old habits die hard.
And you drive people nuts because they're trying to have a conversation with you and you're looking around the room.
Yeah, Jack and I do that all the time. That's why we get along so well. We watch everything and everybody. We can probably tell you their life history and have never met them before. We are getting down to the 12-minute mark, and before I have to close this show out, what I would like for each of you guys to do, and Al, I'm going to start with you. I would like for you to leave some words of wisdom, some thoughts for our listening audience to carry with them and to hold on to, because we do love our police officers. We appreciate them. We're grateful to them. We honor them. We respect them. And when one of you guys hurt, the whole blue line hurts. So go ahead and have some final thoughts.
Well, first off, if you're thinking your children come to you and ask you about being a policeman, don't let them. Make them be a fireman. That's what I tell my kids. And I say that jokingly. Both my daughters, it's proof that God's a practical joker. Both my daughters married firemen. And they're wonderful young men, and I'm truly blessed to have these two boys as my son-in-laws. And we have a very closeness of our own, too, aside from the fact. But in all seriousness, just remember that, you know, you don't get dressed in your uniform every day and check yourself out in the mirror and say, who can I go hurt today? Who can I go beat up? Who can I go shoot? What you do is, you know, at the very beginning of my shift in my patrol car, I always did it so I could be alone, not because of the ridicule, but because it was just something of my own. I would always pray and ask for guidance and safety, but mostly I asked for wisdom to do the right thing in my job each day. And it sounds corny, but, you know, I always felt a little better and a little more self-assured when I did that. And you know, who could I help today? What could I do? What decision can I make that will work out for the best for everybody involved? And that was the mindset of, I would say, 95% of the cops that I worked with. You know, you wanted to go out, you wanted to do a good job, you wanted to do the right thing. And you know, when you hear all these bad things about cops, sure, there's bad cops, absolutely, and they need to be dealt with. And I'd be the first guy to help deal with them. But at the same time, that's not the majority. That's the minority. You know, they just want to come home safely at the end of the shift, see their kids, see their family, and have done something, hopefully, to have helped somebody during the shift. So keep that in mind when you...
Go ahead, finish.
Yeah, I'd like to second everything that Al said there. You know, you really want to go to work, you want to do your job, and like you said, you want to hopefully make the day a little bit better for somebody. It would be nice if you could touch somebody in a positive way. I used to, you know, for myself, and I used to tell my rookies in training and even, you know, some of the more seasoned officers, I used to like to leave them with the thought, like, treat the people out there the way you'd like to see your family treated. You know, because you don't know who you're pulling over. You could be pulling over the nicest guy going, good family man, and you want to treat them with respect. And you want to treat respect everybody you pull over. But that's, the problem with law enforcement. You don't know who you're pulling over. So you always got to be on your toes. You got to stay sharp. And it's the little things like that make the life difficult for a police officer. It's a challenge, but it's something, like I said, it's a calling. We all do it. If you see a police officer today, and if you're, casually walking by, say hello, say thank you. I remember it was the days right after 9/11. I was still stationed in Queens, but I was doing a security detail in one of the local political establishments, and people were coming up to me right and left. Thank you, officer. Thank you for your work. Stay safe. And it felt good that the people were doing that, because in my 20 previous years, that never happened to me before. And now people all of a sudden coming up and appreciating the work, the police officers were doing. And I think today still police officers appreciate that when people come up to them and offer them a word of thanks. And it makes us feel good because, like I say, it is a calling. It's something we want to do. We want to make lives better for people, in the ways our job limits us to do. And it's rewarding. And, I just tell officers today, just, hey, watch your back, stay safe, and just do a good job and stay true to yourself.
So right quick, I need for you to tell the listening audience the name of your book and where you can be found.
Well, the name of the book is Night Watchers, and it's written by me, B.P. Ryan, and it's available on Kindle or in paperback from Amazon. So look it up. I think you'll enjoy it.
And you are on
Facebook,
Facebook,
there's one
right?
character in there that's really good.
Oh, yes. There's one special character from Florida that makes a cameo appearance.
Yes, he does.
And his initials are Al Hallonquist.
Al, tell people where you can be found, my friend, for your security business.
It's a very simple website. It's www.securityconsults.com.
Now, I want to tell you guys, we've got 7 minutes left. I want to tell you guys that I appreciate the fact that y'all gave up 2 hours of your time to sit with me and to talk with me and talk with each other and air out some things and misconceptions about my wonderful cop friends and how much I love them, and explain to people that your job is not glamorous. It is a passion. You either love it or you hate it. And if you hate it, get out of it. If you love it,
exactly.
Work it with everything you have and be proud of the job that you do. And for you two gentlemen to honor me by agreeing to come on this show and tell war stories and fairy tales and to talk about some issues that are difficult to talk about, but we have to have that conversation, because if we don't have that conversation,
yes,
we have no solutions. So I appreciate y'all so much for your sacrifice. I love you for your dedication, for being willing to be part of that thin blue line, for being willing to put yourself between me and the bad guy, and that I know that I am protected. I can lay down at night and know that there's a police car that will drive up and down my street. Or even one night I get a knock on my door at midnight, and all the lights in the house are out except our bedroom light, and we're reading, and somebody's knocking on my door. And I've heard enough police knocks. I'm thinking, why is a policeman at my door at midnight? So I open the door, and the young man says, I just wanted to let you know your garage door is open. Did you know you left it open? And I said, no, and I thank you because I had a brain fart. That young officer did not know if he was going to be met at the door with a gun, a knife, a cuss word, or whatever. But he was kind enough to knock on my door to tell me I had been stupid and left my garage door open. That took courage.
Yeah,
because
that's
he didn't
what
know
we do.
what was behind. Yeah, but he didn't know what was behind that door.
No, that's for sure.
But he did
No,
it,
yes,
and I am forever grateful, and I sent a letter of commendation to his superior officer because that meant something to me. That he thought enough of me as a person to knock on my door, not knowing how he was going to be met. So I appreciate you guys so much, and I know y'all are probably sick of hearing it, but I really don't care. Because I'm going to keep telling you how wonderful you are. And for all of my listening audience out there, it's like Brian says, if you see a cop, thank them. Buy them a cup of coffee. Buy them that meal. Let them know.
Or a donut. Buy them a donut.
Or a donut. Yeah, even a donut.
I'll take it.
Let them know how much you appreciate what they do for you, because they are the only thing between you and anarchy. They are the only thing between you and a crime. They are the only thing between you and sometimes death. So if you want to scream Black Lives Matter, that's fine. But if you're going to be part of that movement, then you need to be part of the solution, and the solution is to go into the inner cities and help the police officers, help those young people, mentor those young people, teach them how to be productive in society, how to respect authority, how to respect the police officer, not because he's going to come and beat down on their head or tote them off to the pokey, but because they are the protection between them and death.
Amen.
So thank a cop. Make it your life's work to thank a cop, to appreciate that cop, and to know that that cop has a family, that cop is loved, and that cop puts his uniform every day on his back without any thought to whether or not he'll come home. Any final thoughts, guys? We got about 30 seconds.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great catching up with Al, and it was nice meeting you. It was a great time.
You sure was. Thanks a lot.
Well, y'all were high on my list, and Al, you had a brilliant idea of inviting Brian, because his book, when I got through with it, if I could have got my hands on him, I'd have probably smacked him myself. It was that twisted and that good. I'm going, where is he going with this? And then all of a sudden I went, whammo, right between the eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to get this book. And I'm telling you, this book, Night Watcher.
Yeah, you really do.
It will absolutely just blow you out of the water, because you think you've got it figured out, and you don't. Now, tomorrow night, you are welcome, guys. Tomorrow night, my guest will be Stacey Soros, and her story will break your heart. She wrote the book State of Sorrow, and you will find out why when you listen to the show. It is an hour show from 8 until 9. So join me tomorrow night when I speak with Stacey. And again, guys, thank you so very much for joining me tonight. I appreciate it more than you know.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, until tomorrow night, as you know, this is your host, Yvonne Mason, and this show is called Off the Chain, because we are always off the chain. Guys, thank you very much, and I will send y'all the links for this show, and y'all can use them. Brian, you can use them to promote your book and get all your friends to listen to them, so I'll send you all the links as soon as I get them uploaded.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys, and I'll talk to y'all later.
All right.
Take care. See you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.